it? You think you can just sit here?
I bought this seat. Now step aside.
What would you do if the seat you paid for, the one you earned, was taken right in front of you, and no one believed it was ever yours? The question hung in the air long before Ryan Mitchell ever stepped onto that plane. At Phoenix Sky Harbor, late afternoon light spilled through the glass walls, casting long shadows across the terminal floor. People moved in waves. Rolling suitcases clicked like distant metronomes. Voices overlapped. Announcements echoed, sharp and hollow. It all blurred together. Ryan walked through it slowly. 45 years old, broad shoulders, calm eyes. The kind of calm that didn't come from peace, but from pressure. Years of it. Boardrooms, deadlines, deals that could break companies or build them overnight. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. Not this time. Not after a week where every call had demanded something. Every email had chipped away at whatever silence he had left. He had learned something a long time ago. If you didn't protect your quiet, the world would take it from you piece by piece. He tightened his grip on the worn leather handle of his carry-on. The leather was soft, aged, not flashy, not expensive-looking, but it had been with him through more cities than he could count. A man brushed past him, muttering into a headset. A couple argued near the gate screen, their voices tight, brittle. A young woman in heels stood frozen, staring at a delayed departure notice like it had personally betrayed her. Ryan noticed everything. He always did. Not out of curiosity, out of habit. Because when you grow up being underestimated, you learn to read rooms before rooms read you. He reached the Delta Lounge, nodded to the attendant, and stepped inside. The noise softened instantly. Carpet swallowed footsteps. Glasses clinked gently. Conversations dropped to low, controlled murmurs. He poured himself a coffee. Black, no sugar. Sat by the window. Outside, planes taxied under a fading Arizona sky. Engines roared in the distance, then faded. Roared again. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Simple grey polo, dark jeans, sneakers. Nothing about him said power. That was intentional. He glanced at his phone. One headline caught his eye. An airline executive apologizing for another overbooking disaster. He let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and a warning. They never learn. 10 minutes later, his phone buzzed again. Boarding. Ryan stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked back into the current of the terminal. Gate B24 was already crowded. People pressed forward before their groups were called. Eyes on the line, eyes on status, eyes on who belonged and who didn't. Ryan stayed back, watched. A man in a navy blazer sighed loudly, tapping his watch like time owed him something. A woman in pearls leaned forward, scanning boarding passes in other people's hands, measuring them without speaking. And then he saw her, Linda Parker, early 50s, blonde hair cut clean at the shoulders, cream blazer, pearl earrings that caught the light just enough to announce presence without asking for it. She stood near the first-class lane, foot tapping once, then again. Not impatient, certain. Her eyes moved across the crowd, not searching, sorting. Ryan noticed the way people shifted around her. Subtle, almost unconscious. Space opening where she stood, like she carried an invisible authority no one questioned. He looked away. Group 1 was called. Ryan stepped forward when his turn came. No rush, no hesitation. He handed over his boarding pass. The scanner beeped clean. Green. "Have a good flight, Mr. Mitchell," the gate agent said, polite, automatic. He nodded once and walked down the jet bridge. The air changed instantly. Cooler, narrower, quieter. Each step echoed. Seat 2A window. A small piece of silence he had paid for. Earned. But something in the air felt off. Ryan didn't know it yet. But the moment he stepped onto that plane, that silence was already gone. The aisle felt tighter than usual, like the air itself was holding its breath. Ryan stepped onto the aircraft, nodding once to the flight attendant at the door. "Welcome aboard," she said, her smile polished, practiced, eyes already moving past him to the next passenger. He didn't take it personally. People like her learned to scan fast, judge faster. He moved down the aisle with quiet precision, his carry-on rolling smoothly behind him. First class was calm, almost staged. Soft lighting, leather seats, low voices. The faint scent of citrus and something expensive. Row 1 passed. Then row 2. He slowed. Seat 2A. Occupied. Ryan stopped. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just still. Like something inside him had paused before the rest of the world caught up. There she was. Linda Parker, seated comfortably in his window seat. Her handbag rested neatly beside her, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. Her posture relaxed, not tentative, not uncertain, settled, like she had always been there. Ryan blinked once. The overhead bin clicked shut somewhere behind him. A man cleared his throat. Someone shifted impatiently in the aisle. The world kept moving. He didn't. For a second, he wondered if he'd misread his boarding pass. It happened. Rarely. But it happened. He glanced down. Seat 2A. No mistake. He looked back up. Linda didn't move. Didn't even look at him at first. Her eyes stayed on her phone, scrolling slowly, thumb steady, controlled. The kind of movement that said she wasn't in a hurry, didn't need to be. Ryan stepped closer. "Excuse me," he said, voice even, low. "I think you might be in my seat." Linda lifted her eyes just enough to meet his. A pause, then a small smile. Tight. Polite. Dismissive. "I'm in 2A, she said, already looking back down at her screen, like the conversation had ended before it began. Behind Ryan, the line stalled. A man exhaled sharply. "Come on," someone muttered under their breath. Phones shifted in hands, eyes lifted, curiosity spreading like a quiet ripple. Ryan didn't turn around. "I don't think so," he said calmly. "My boarding pass says 2A. Linda sighed softly. Not annoyed, amused. She raised her phone, tilting it toward him without fully turning her body. "It's right here," she said, voice louder now. Just enough for others to hear. Just enough to make it public. Ryan leaned in slightly. 3C, clear as day. Middle seat, different row, different world. He straightened. "That says 3C, he said. "No edge. Just fact." Linda's smile flickered. "Not gone. Just sharpened." "No," she replied, a light laugh slipping into her tone. I always sit here. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper. A woman 2 rows back leaned forward, eyes narrowing, trying to piece it together without getting involved. Ryan felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger. Recognition. He had seen this before. Not the seat, not the plane. But the moment. The quiet assumption. The invisible line being drawn without words. He kept his voice steady. Seats don't stay the same for people, he said. They change every flight. Linda's posture stiffened, just slightly. Her fingers wrapped around her phone a little tighter. Well, maybe they made a mistake, she said. But this is my seat. Ryan let the silence sit between them. Heavy now. Noticeable. I'd appreciate it if you could check again, he said. So we can get everyone seated. She didn't move, didn't even glance at the screen again. Instead, she crossed one leg over the other, settling deeper into the seat. Claiming it. Physically. Visibly. Maybe you should just take 3C, she said. The words landed like a quiet slap. A murmur moved through the cabin. Subtle. Disbelieving. That's not how it works, someone whispered. Ryan's grip tightened on the strap of his bag. For a moment, just a moment, the noise of the plane faded. The people, the voices, the pressure behind him. All of it dropped away. And what remained was something older. Boardrooms where he had to introduce himself, twice. Meetings where people assumed he was there to assist, not lead. Moments where proof was never enough, where presence itself was questioned. He inhaled slowly, measured, controlled. Then he looked directly at her. With all due respect, he said, voice firm now, grounded. I paid for seat 2A. I'm not moving. The air shifted. You could feel it. Like the moment before a storm breaks. And somewhere behind them, a flight attendant started walking faster. The flight attendant's heels struck the aisle with sharp, controlled steps, each one echoing just a little louder than it should have. Is there a problem here? Her voice cut clean through the tension. Emily Carter, early 30s. Blonde hair pulled tight into a bun. Uniform pressed to perfection. Smile in place. But her eyes were already calculating. Ryan exhaled once, slow. Yes, he said. This is my seat. 2A. But it's occupied. Emily turned toward Linda first. Of course she did. Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass? Linda handed over her phone with a soft sigh, like this entire situation was beneath her. I've already explained, she said, her voice carrying just enough to invite agreement. This is my seat. Emily glanced at the screen, paused. There it was again. That flicker. Ryan saw it. The hesitation. The split second where truth was clear, but something else weighed heavier. It shows 3C, Emily said finally, her tone careful, controlled. Not 2A. Ryan felt the smallest shift in the air. Validation. Brief. Fragile. But Linda didn't move. She tilted her head slightly, studying Emily the way someone studies a mistake they expect to be corrected. That can't be right, she said. I booked first class weeks ago. I always sit in this seat. Emily's smile tightened. Yes, ma'am, you are in first class, she said. But your assigned seat is 3C, assigned. The word hung there. Official. Final. It should have ended things. It didn't. Linda's fingers tapped once against her phone. "Then the system is wrong," she said. "Fix it." A few passengers shifted in their seats. One man coughed. Another leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching like it was a show he hadn't paid for, but wasn't about to miss. Ryan stayed still, waiting, watching. Emily hesitated again, and this time it lasted longer. Ryan felt it in his bones, that moment where the right decision is obvious, but the easy decision starts whispering louder. "Well," Emily said, her voice softening, "there may be other available seats." Ryan turned his head slightly. Not fast, not aggressive, but enough to stop her. "I'm not looking for another seat," he said. Silence snapped back into place. Emily looked at him now, really looked. Grey polo. No watch worth noticing. No brand shouting for attention. No signal, no marker. Her eyes moved back to Linda. Cream blazer. Pearls. Confidence that filled the space without asking. The calculation shifted. Ryan saw it happen, and something cold settled in his chest. "Sir," Emily said, her tone changing just enough to sound reasonable, "we're just trying to get everyone seated quickly." There it was. Efficiency, not fairness. Ryan nodded once. "I understand," he said, "and the quickest way to do that is for her to move to her assigned seat." A man across the aisle murmured, "Exactly," under his breath. Linda's jaw tightened. "I'm not moving," she said flatly. Emily inhaled. Slow, measured, caught. "Ma'am," she tried again. "If you could just—" "No," Linda cut in, louder now. "I'm not going to squeeze into a middle seat because of a mistake I didn't make." A ripple moved through the cabin. Middle seat. The word carried weight. Discomfort, status, hierarchy. Ryan felt it. So did everyone else. And suddenly, this wasn't about a number on a boarding pass anymore. It was about who deserved comfort, who didn't. Emily shifted her stance. "Ooh. Sir," she said, turning back to Ryan, "would you be willing to take another first-class seat? I can offer complimentary." "No." The word came out clean, immediate, unshaken. Emily blinked. Ryan held her gaze. "I booked 2A, he said. "I chose it. I paid for it. I'm sitting in it." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, every syllable landing exactly where it needed to. Linda laughed softly. "Unbelievable," she muttered. Ryan didn't look at her, didn't need to. He could feel the room now, eyes on him, measuring, judging, waiting to see which way this would break. Emily glanced toward the front of the cabin, toward the cockpit, toward authority. Then back at Ryan. Something in her expression shifted again. Less patience. More pressure. "Sir," she said, quieter now, but sharper, "if we can't resolve this quickly, we may have to involve the captain." Ryan didn't move, didn't blink, didn't soften. "Then call him." The words landed like a door closing. Final. And somewhere in the back of the cabin, a phone lifted just a little higher, capturing everything. The silence stretched, thin and sharp, like something about to snap. Emily didn't move right away. Her fingers hovered near the small device clipped to her uniform, the one she used to call the cockpit. She hesitated just long enough for everyone to notice. That hesitation said everything. A man in row 3 leaned back, arms crossed, watching with narrowed eyes. The woman beside him whispered, "This is ridiculous," but didn't look away. Across the aisle, someone had their phone angled just right, pretending to scroll, but the camera lens was pointed forward. Linda shifted in the seat. Not uncomfortable, possessive. She adjusted her blazer, smoothed it over her lap, then reached for her glass like she had already won. "Honestly," she said, shaking her head, "all this over a seat." Ryan let out a slow breath. There it was again. That word, just a seat. He had heard it his whole life. Just a misunderstanding. Just a mix-up. Just let it go. He looked at Emily. "Go ahead," he said quietly. "Call the captain." Emily's jaw tightened. She turned, finally tapping the device. Her voice dropped into a lower, controlled register. "Captain, we have a situation in first class. Seat assignment dispute. Passenger refusing to relocate." The words landed wrong. Ryan heard it immediately. Not accurate. Not neutral. Framed. He didn't interrupt. Not yet. A few seconds passed. The hum of the plane filled the space. Air circulating. Engines distant but present. The world outside continuing like nothing was happening. Then footsteps. Heavy. Measured. Captain Robert Hayes. Mid-50s. Tall. Silver hair. The kind of presence that quieted a room without effort. His uniform was sharp, precise, authority in fabric form. He stepped into the aisle, eyes scanning once, quickly. He looked at Linda, then at Ryan, and Ryan saw it. That same calculation. Fast, automatic, wrong. "What seems to be the issue?" Hayes asked, voice calm but firm. Emily spoke first. "Seat 2A, sir. We have a discrepancy. This gentleman is refusing to move so we can accommodate." Ryan turned his head slightly. "That's not accurate." The captain's eyes snapped back to him, sharp now, focused. Ryan didn't raise his voice, didn't rush. "This is my seat," he said. "I have a confirmed boarding pass for 2A. She's assigned to 3C. Hayes held out his hand. "Let me see your boarding pass." Ryan handed it over. The captain glanced at it. Brief. Then at Linda. "Ma'am, your boarding pass." Linda sighed, as if inconvenienced by the request, and handed over her phone. "I don't know why this is even happening," she said. "I've never had this problem before." Hayes looked at her screen. Paused. There it was again. That moment. Truth. Clear. Undeniable. 3C. Ryan watched the captain's face. Waiting. 1 second. 2. Then Hayes exhaled, and something shifted. Not toward truth, toward convenience. "Well," he said slowly, handing the phone back, "it appears there may have been a system error." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Ryan felt it hit him like a quiet blow. Not surprise, recognition. Of course. "Captain," Ryan said, still calm, still controlled. "There's no error. The assignments are clear." Hayes looked at him again. Longer this time. taking in the details. Clothes, posture, presence, still measuring. "Sir," Hayes said, voice firming, "we're trying to avoid delaying this flight. We need cooperation from all passengers." Cooperation. Ryan almost smiled. Almost. "So do I," he replied. The tension climbed. Faster now. The woman in row 3 leaned forward again. "He showed the boarding pass," she said, louder this time. "You can see it's his seat." Heads turned. The invisible line cracked. Someone else spoke up. "Yeah, why is he the one being asked to move?" Linda's expression hardened. "This is getting out of hand," she snapped. "I'm not sitting in a middle seat." "I don't care what that says." Hayes raised a hand slightly, trying to regain control. "Let's keep this orderly." But it was already slipping. The room had shifted. Ryan felt it. Support. Small, uncertain, but growing. He stepped forward half a step. Not aggressive, but present, grounded. "You're asking me to give up something I paid for," he said, looking directly at the captain now. "Based on nothing but assumption." Hayes didn't respond immediately, and in that silence, something else entered the space. Pressure. Not from Ryan. From the eyes, the cameras, the witnesses. The story forming in real time. Ryan held the moment, then spoke again. Slower. Sharper. "So I'll ask you clearly, Captain," he said. "Are you going to enforce the actual boarding assignments, or are you going to decide who you think belongs here?" The question landed like a blade. Clean. Unavoidable. And for the first time since he stepped onto the plane, the captain didn't have an answer ready. The question didn't just hang in the air. It pressed down on it. You could feel it in the silence that followed. Captain Hayes didn't respond right away. His jaw tightened just enough to notice. His fingers tapped once against the edge of the seat. A small movement. Controlled. But it gave him away. He had heard the question. He just didn't like what answering it would mean. Linda shifted beside him, her voice cutting in, sharp now. "This is absurd," she said. "Are we really holding up an entire flight over this?" Her eyes flicked toward the other passengers, searching for agreement, for support, for validation. Some looked away. Others didn't. A man across the aisle leaned forward. "It's not about the flight," he said quietly. "It's about what's right." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. Ryan didn't move, didn't speak. He didn't need to. The room was speaking now. Hayes exhaled slowly, stepping forward just enough to reclaim space. "Sir," he said, turning back to Ryan, voice measured, authoritative. "We're not making judgments about anyone. We're trying to resolve a situation efficiently." Ryan's eyes didn't leave his. "Then resolve it correctly," he said. "No emotion. No hesitation. Just truth." Emily shifted uncomfortably beside them. "Captain, boarding is almost complete," she said under her breath. "We're already running behind." Time. There it was. The invisible force that bends decisions. The excuse people hide behind when doing the wrong thing feels easier than doing the right one. Hayes nodded once, almost to himself. Then he made his choice. "Sir," he said, firmer now, "I'm asking you one final time. Will you take another seat so we can depart?" The words landed heavy. Final time. Ryan felt something settle deep inside him. Not anger. Clarity. He had been here before. Different rooms, different faces. Same moment. The moment where you're expected to shrink, to make it easier, to not be difficult, to not be too much. He looked around the cabin. Phones were no longer hidden. They were up, open, recording. A woman near the back shook her head slowly, disbelief written across her face. A younger man whispered, "This is going to blow up," barely containing it. Ryan turned back to the captain. "No," he said. Simple. Unmoved. A crack ran through the moment. Linda let out a sharp breath. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "Absolutely unbelievable." Hayes's expression hardened. The patience was gone now, replaced by something colder. "Procedure. Then I'm going to have to ask you to step off the aircraft," he said. "We'll sort this out at the gate." The words hit the cabin like a shockwave. A few gasps. Someone whispered, "For what?" Ryan didn't flinch, didn't step back. He just stood there, steady, grounded, like the ground beneath him belonged to him. "On what basis?" he asked. Hayes held his gaze. Failure to comply with crew instructions. Ryan let out a slow breath. There it was, the script, the one that turns right into wrong, the one that makes resistance look like disruption. He nodded once. "Let me make sure I understand," he said, voice calm but cutting now. "You're asking me to leave a seat I paid for because I refuse to give it up to someone else who didn't pay for it." Hayes didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence said enough. Ryan glanced around again. The cabin wasn't neutral anymore. It had chosen. Not loudly, not all at once, but you could feel it. Shifting. A woman stood halfway out of her seat. "This is wrong," she said, louder now. "He hasn't done anything." Another voice followed. "Yeah, you can't just kick him off for that." The pressure changed direction. Not toward Ryan, toward them. Emily's eyes darted between the captain and the passengers, uncertainty creeping in. Linda crossed her arms, jaw tight. But her confidence wasn't as solid now. It had cracks, small, but visible. Ryan reached into his pocket, slowly, deliberately. He pulled out his phone. The movement drew attention immediately. Hayes's eyes narrowed. "Sir, what are you doing?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He looked at the screen. One name, at the top of his contacts. He tapped it. The line began to ring. Once. Twice. The cabin held its breath. Then someone picked up. Ryan lifted the phone to his ear, and for the first time since this began, his voice changed. Still calm, but now precise, controlled in a different way. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm going to need you to get someone on the line. Senior level." A pause. His eyes stayed locked on the captain. "Now." The word now didn't echo. It landed, sharp, final, controlled. The voice on the other end responded instantly, low, alert. "Mr. Mitchell?" Ryan didn't blink. "I need executive operations," he said, "and I need them listening." A pause, not confusion. Movement. "I'm connecting you," the voice replied. Ryan lowered the phone slightly, not away from his ear, just enough for the sound to carry. The cabin leaned in without moving. Even the hum of the aircraft seemed to fade under the weight of what was happening. Captain Hayes watched him closely now. Different. Not dismissive anymore. Curious. Cautious. Linda shifted in her seat, the confidence in her posture tightening, like something unseen had just entered the room. "Who exactly are you calling?" she asked, her voice edged now, no longer smooth. Ryan didn't look at her, didn't need to. A click. Another voice joined the line. Crisp, professional, immediate. "This is Daniel Brooks, Executive Operations. Who am I speaking with?" Ryan let half a second pass. Not for effect. For control. "Ryan Mitchell," he said. The name landed. Soft, but heavy. There was a pause on the line. Not long. Just enough. Then the tone shifted. "Mr. Mitchell," Brooks said. Sharper now. "What's the situation?" Ryan's eyes never left the captain. "I'm on flight 627, he said. "First class. Seat 2A. I've been asked to give up my seat to accommodate another passenger. When I refused, I was told I'd be removed." Silence. Then a breath on the other end. "Who made that call?" Brooks asked. Ryan didn't answer with words. He tilted the phone slightly. Toward the captain. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Hayes felt it. You could see it in the way his shoulders adjusted, the way his stance shifted from authority to awareness. Brooks spoke again, slower now. "Captain, are you there?" Hayes hesitated. Just for a second. Then stepped forward. "Yes," he said, voice steady, but no longer as firm. "Captain Robert Hayes, explain the situation," Brooks said. No softness, no delay. Hayes glanced at Ryan, then at Linda, then at the cabin. All those eyes, all those phones, all that pressure. "We had a seating discrepancy," he began. "We were attempting to resolve it efficiently. Is the passenger in seat 2? The rightful ticket holder?" Brooks cut in. The question sliced through everything. Clean. Direct. Hayes paused. There it was again. That moment. Truth. He looked at Ryan, then down at the boarding pass still in his hand. 2A. Clear. Undeniable. "Yes," Hayes said finally. A shift rippled through the cabin. Subtle, but real. "And you attempted to remove him?" Brooks asked. Hayes's jaw tightened. "We asked him to relocate to avoid delay." "That's not what I asked," Brooks replied. The air changed. Completely. "No," Hayes said. The word came out quieter now. Measured. Controlled in a different way. Ryan stood still, unmoving, watching the entire structure adjust itself around a single fact. Brooks exhaled on the other end. "Put me on speaker." Ryan didn't hesitate. He tapped the screen. The voice filled the cabin. "Everyone listen carefully," Brooks said. "This situation is being reviewed in real time. No passenger is to be removed from a seat they rightfully paid for. That is not policy. That is not acceptable." A murmur spread. Not quiet anymore. Not hidden. Linda's fingers tightened around the armrest. "This is ridiculous," she said, but it didn't carry the same weight. "Not anymore." Brooks continued. "Captain Hayes, you will correct this immediately." Hayes didn't respond right away. He couldn't. Because now it wasn't just a decision. It was a record, a line that would exist long after this flight ended. "Yes," he said finally. Ryan watched him, not with satisfaction, not with anger, with clarity. The kind that comes when something hidden is finally forced into the light. Hayes turned, slowly, toward Linda. "Ma'am," he said, voice controlled, but different now. "I'm going to need you to move to your assigned seat." The words landed. Final. No room left. Linda stared at him, then at Ryan. Something flickered in her eyes. Not disbelief, not anger. Something closer to realization. Too late. And for the first time since this began, she didn't have anything to say. For a moment, no one moved. Not Linda, not the captain, not even the passengers who had been whispering just seconds ago. It was like the entire cabin had been frozen in place, waiting to see if reality would actually follow through. Linda blinked once. Slow. Her fingers tightened around the armrest, knuckles paling just enough to show strain beneath the polished exterior. "I'm not sitting in a middle seat," she said. But the conviction wasn't there anymore. It sounded thinner, smaller. Captain Hayes didn't look away. "Ma'am," he repeated, firmer now. "You need to move. No apology, no negotiation, just instruction." Linda let out a sharp breath, something between disbelief and irritation. She looked around, searching again for support. For someone to nod, to agree, to validate what she had been so certain of minutes ago. But the room had changed. The man across the aisle shook his head slightly. The woman behind Ryan lowered her phone just enough to meet Linda's eyes, not with anger, but with something colder. Judgment. Even Emily stood differently now. Shoulders back, chin lifted. No more hesitation. Linda felt it. That shift, the loss of invisible ground beneath her. She turned back to Ryan, studied him. Really studied him this time. The plain shirt, the worn bag, the calm, the silence that had never broken. Something didn't add up. "Who are you?" she asked. It came out quieter than she intended. Ryan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was already unfolding around her. "Ma'am," Hayes said again, less patient now. "We're not going to delay this flight any further." A beat, then another, and finally Linda moved, slowly, deliberately, like every motion cost her something. She uncrossed her legs, reached for her bag, stood up. The cabin watched, not loudly, but completely. She stepped into the aisle, brushing past Ryan without looking at him. Not because she didn't want to, because she couldn't. There was nothing left to hold on to. No argument, no authority, no illusion. She walked down the aisle toward row 3, each step measured, controlled, but heavier than before. The middle seat waited. 3C. Unavoidable. As she reached it, she paused for half a second, just enough for it to register. Then she sat. The seat swallowed her posture. Smaller, tighter, real. A quiet ripple moved through the cabin. Not applause, not celebration. Something deeper. Recognition. Ryan remained where he was. Still. Grounded. Captain Hayes stepped back, clearing the space. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, voice more formal now. "Your seat is ready." Ryan nodded once. No triumph, no smile. He lifted his bag, placed it carefully in the overhead bin, and lowered himself into seat 2A. The leather creaked softly under his weight. The window framed the fading sky. For a moment, everything stilled again. But it wasn't the same stillness. This one had weight. History. A line drawn and held. Emily stepped forward. "Can I get you something to drink, sir?" she asked. Her tone had changed, not forced, respectful. Ryan glanced up at her. "Water's fine." She nodded quickly. "Of course." Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper leaned back again, but this time his eyes stayed on Ryan a second longer. Not curious now. Acknowledging. Behind them, someone whispered. That was something else. Another voice answered. Yeah, it was. The engines began to hum louder as the cabin door closed. But the energy inside the plane didn't return to normal. It couldn't. Because something had shifted. Not just a seat. Not just a moment. Something deeper. Ryan rested his arm on the armrest, fingers relaxed now. But his eyes stayed forward, focused. Because he knew something the rest of them didn't. This wasn't over. Not even close. And somewhere in the front of the plane, behind a closed cockpit door, Captain Hayes stood very still, staring at the panel in front of him, realizing that whatever just happened in that cabin wasn't just a situation. It was a mistake. One that was about to cost more than anyone on that flight was ready for. The plane didn't push back right away. That was the first sign. A delay that didn't come with an announcement. No apology. No explanation. Just stillness, stretching longer than it should have. Ryan noticed. Of course he did. He sat quietly in seat 2A, fingers resting lightly on the armrest, eyes fixed on the runway outside. The sky had shifted into deeper shades now. Orange fading into grey. The kind of light that makes everything look sharper and colder. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper had stopped pretending to read. He folded it slowly, placed it on his lap, and glanced toward the front of the cabin. Something was off. Everyone felt it. Even the air felt heavier. Emily moved quickly up and down the aisle, checking overhead bins that were already closed, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. Busy hands, distracted eyes, avoidance. Ryan picked up on it immediately. She wasn't just finishing her job. She was waiting. In row 3, Linda sat rigid in the middle seat, her shoulders drawn in, her presence diminished by the narrow space. She hadn't spoken since she moved, not to the passengers beside her, not to the crew. Her phone sat in her lap, untouched. But her eyes, they kept drifting forward, toward Ryan, trying to make sense of something she didn't understand. Up front, behind the thin curtain separating first class from the rest of the aircraft, voices moved in low, urgent tones. Captain Hayes, another crew member, and someone else, not part of the flight. Ryan didn't need to hear the words. He knew the rhythm, the shift from routine to damage control. A man in row 4 leaned toward his wife. "Why aren't we moving?" he whispered. She shook her head slightly. "Something's going on." A soft chime sounded overhead, then silence again. Ryan reached for the small screen in front of him, tapped it once, then stopped. No need. Whatever this was, it wasn't technical. It was human. And human problems didn't resolve themselves quietly. A few moments later, the curtain pulled back. A man stepped into first class, mid-40s, dark suit, no uniform, no badge visible. But everything about him said authority. Not loud, not obvious, but present. He scanned the cabin once, eyes moving quickly, then stopping. On Ryan. He walked forward, each step measured, intentional. The cabin watched again, not the same way as before. This time, it was anticipation. He stopped beside seat 2. Mr. Mitchell," he said. Not a question. Recognition. Ryan looked up slowly, met his eyes. "Yeah," he said. The man nodded once. "Daniel Brooks," he said quietly. "We spoke on the phone." A ripple moved through the cabin. The name didn't mean much to most people, but the tone did. The way he stood, the way he spoke, the way Captain Hayes appeared behind him, not leading, but following. That told the story. Brooks glanced briefly at Hayes, then back at Ryan. "I want to apologize," he said. "This should have been handled correctly the first time." Ryan held his gaze, didn't rush to respond, didn't make it easy. "That's one way to put it," he said. Brooks accepted it with a small nod. No defense, no excuses. Behind him, Hayes shifted slightly, the weight of the moment settling deeper on his shoulders. Brooks turned just enough to address the cabin. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we're experiencing a brief delay while we address a personnel matter. We appreciate your patience." Personnel. The word landed differently. Not mechanical, not procedural. Personal. A woman in row 3 leaned forward. "Does that mean someone's getting fired?" she whispered. No one answered, but everyone heard. Brooks turned back to Ryan, lowered his voice. "This won't end here," he said. "Not a promise, a statement." Ryan studied him, measured, then gave a slight nod. "I know," he said. Outside, a ground vehicle rolled past the window, lights flashing briefly against the side of the aircraft. Inside, the tension didn't break. It deepened. Because now, it wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about consequences. And somewhere behind them, Linda Parker sat perfectly still, realizing that whatever she thought this moment was going to be, she had been wrong from the very beginning. The word personnel didn't fade. It settled, heavy, permanent, like something already decided. Captain Hayes stood just behind Daniel Brooks, shoulders squared, but the authority he carried earlier had thinned, not gone, but stripped of certainty. His eyes moved once across the cabin, catching the phone still raised, the faces still watching, the silence that hadn't loosened. This wasn't a delay anymore. This was exposure. Brooks turned slightly, lowering his voice, but not enough to disappear. "Captain," he said, "step with me." "Not a suggestion." Hayes nodded. They moved a few steps toward the front, just past the curtain, but not far enough to escape the room. Not far enough to hide. Ryan didn't follow with his eyes. He didn't need to. He could hear enough, could feel enough. "This should never have escalated," Brooks said, voice controlled but edged now. "You had the correct boarding pass in your hand." Hayes responded quietly. "We were trying to avoid a delay." A pause. Then Brooks again, sharper. "At the cost of policy, at the cost of liability." Silence. That silence answered everything. Back in the cabin, the tension shifted again. No longer uncertainty. Now, clarity. A man in row 2 leaned closer to his wife. "He's done," he whispered. She nodded once. Yeah. You don't come back from that. Across the aisle, Emily stood still, hands clasped in front of her, her posture rigid now. Not from training, from awareness. From the realization that she had been part of something she couldn't explain away. Her eyes flicked once toward Ryan, then away. In row 3, Linda sat motionless, but her breathing had changed, shorter, tighter. The confidence that once filled her space had collapsed inward. Her gaze stayed fixed on the back of Ryan's seat, like it held an answer she hadn't been prepared for. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Not about the seat, about everything else. Up front, Brooks stepped back into full view. Alone. That told the story before he even spoke. Captain Hayes followed a second later, but slower now. Not beside him. Behind. Position mattered. Everyone saw it. Brooks addressed the cabin again. "We appreciate your patience," he said. "We are finalizing a corrective action so we can depart." Corrective action. Another word. Another shift. The cabin absorbed it. A low murmur followed, quieter now, but heavier. Not curiosity anymore. Judgment. Ryan leaned back in his seat, fingers resting lightly against the armrest. Calm. Still. But his presence filled the space differently now. Not passive. Definitive. He didn't look at anyone. But everyone looked at him, because now the question wasn't what happened. It was who he was. And why one phone call had changed everything. Brooks turned slightly toward Emily. "I'll need you and the rest of the crew to remain after landing," he said. Her throat tightened. "Yes, sir." No hesitation now, no confusion, just acceptance. He glanced once more at Hayes, then back at Ryan. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, quieter, "this is being documented at the highest level." Ryan met his gaze. A long second, then another. "Good," he said. One word. But it carried weight. Not revenge. Accountability. Outside, the aircraft lights flickered briefly as ground control signaled clearance preparation. Inside, something had already been cleared. The illusion. The assumption. The quiet belief that moments like this disappear once the plane takes off. They don't. They follow. They spread. They become something larger than the people involved. Linda shifted in her seat, finally lowering her eyes, because now she understood. This wasn't about where she sat. It never was. And somewhere deep in the cabin, someone whispered just loud enough to be heard. They picked the wrong person. No one disagreed. The aircraft finally pushed back, slow, controlled. But nothing about the cabin felt routine anymore. The engines rose into a steady hum, vibrations running through the floor, through the seats, through every person on board. Usually, that sound meant escape, distance, a clean break from whatever was left behind on the ground. Not this time. This time, everything had come with them. Ryan sat still, eyes forward, watching the runway lights blur into long streaks as the plane taxied. His hands rested loosely, but his posture hadn't softened. Not yet. Not until the moment was fully done. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper cleared his throat. "You handled that well," he said quietly. Ryan gave a small nod. It needed to be handled. The man studied him for a second longer. Not everyone would have stayed that calm. Ryan didn't respond. Because calm wasn't the point. Control was. Behind them, Linda sat in silence, her earlier confidence gone without a trace. She stared straight ahead now, not at Ryan, not at anyone. Just forward, as if distance alone could erase what had just happened. But it couldn't, not in a space this contained, not with this many witnesses. Emily moved down the aisle again, slower this time. No rushed gestures, no forced smile. When she reached Ryan's row, she paused. "Here you go, sir," she said, handing him a glass of water. Her voice was different now, grounded. Ryan accepted it. "Thank you." She hesitated for half a second, then added quietly, "I'm sorry." 2 words. Simple, but real. Ryan met her eyes briefly. "Make sure it doesn't happen again." She nodded. "It won't." Then she moved on. Up front, behind the closed cockpit door, Captain Hayes ran through the pre-takeoff checklist, his voice steady, but the weight of the last 20 minutes hadn't lifted. It wouldn't. Not when every decision had been seen, recorded, questioned. Not when the consequences were already in motion. The plane turned onto the runway, paused, then surged forward. Engines roared, pressing everyone back into their seats as the ground blurred faster, faster, until it disappeared beneath them. Lift. The city lights dropped away. Silence followed. Not empty silence. Full silence. The kind that comes after something irreversible. Ryan leaned his head back slightly, eyes closing for just a moment. Not to rest, to reset. Because he knew this wasn't the end of anything. This was the beginning of accountability. Across the cabin, phones were still in hands, screens still lit, messages already being sent, videos already uploading. The moment wasn't staying on this plane. It was leaving, spreading, becoming something bigger. A story about a seat, about a decision, about the quiet line between assumption and truth. The man across the aisle picked up his phone, typing slowly. The woman behind him whispered to someone on a call, voice low but urgent. "You're not going to believe what just happened." Ryan opened his eyes again, looking out at the horizon. Dark sky. Endless. He took a slow sip of water, then set the glass down. Calm. Measured. Unshaken. Because moments like this weren't about winning. They were about refusing to disappear. And somewhere behind him, Linda Parker sat in that middle seat, staring at nothing, finally understanding what it felt like to be seen and judged without control. The plane climbed higher. The story moved with it, and the truth stayed exactly where it belonged. If this moment meant something to you, if you believe respect isn't optional, take a second to like, subscribe, and drop 3 words in the comments. Stand your ground.